Okay, so we have Dr. Denise Van Broeklen here with us. Dr. Van Broeklen recently completed her studies for the doctoral program in clinical psychology with Capella University. She's a nationally certified school psychologist with a Master's of Science, a specialist degree in school psychology from Capella, and a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Park University. Denise offers counseling tailored to address the unique challenges of first responders and other high-stress professions and their families, including trauma, anxiety, and relationship dynamics. Her approach focuses on resilience building and emotional well-being, providing a safe space for clients to navigate, and she works with parents whose children exhibit challenging behaviors or struggle with social skills. Dr. Van Brecklen has a special interest in working with veterans and families of individuals with autism and is a parent of a young adult with autism, as well as a parent of a combat veteran. So thank you, Dr. Van Brecklen, for being here for us this
No,
evening.
you're fine.
Um,
Thank
and
you
I
so
will
much
go
for
ahead
inviting me.
and, yeah, absolutely. And then I will go ahead and pull up your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
So tonight's presentation is basically focusing on parenting a child with autism. And I've included the DSM-5 criteria, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And one of the reasons I included it is because a lot of the challenges that our children face lead to issues that we have with behavior and things like that. So that's one of the biggest reasons I included the DSM-5 criteria. Teresa, if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay. And then we'll go to the next one.
Gotcha.
So parenting children with autism versus neurotypical children. As we all know, behavior is a form of communication. And so what is it our child is trying to express to us through their behavior? Is it that they're, upset that there was a change in their routine? Are they experiencing sensory overload? What is it that they're trying to tell us? And so unfortunately, we have to be those detectives and try to figure out what it is that their behavior is basically their form of communication. So when they're acting out, it's not necessarily because they're making poor behavior choices. There could be a lot of other things that are going on. Children with autism, we all know, do not have a strong concept of cause and effect. So because they don't understand cause and effect, it's hard for them to understand, well, if I did behavior A, then this is what's going to happen. For example, we tell our children, don't touch the stove. And it might take one time and they learn, oh, this is hot. With our children with autism, it may take more than one time for them to understand that, oh, this is hot, I shouldn't be touching it. Or, I shouldn't be jumping on my bed because I could fall off and break my arm. Whatever the behavior is that they are displaying at the time. Also, we have to remember a lot of our children with autism and other developmental disabilities have slow processing speed. So it takes them time to kind of take that information that we're giving them, process it, make sense of it, and then come up with some kind of a product or reaction to whatever it is that we're asking them. One example that I tend to use when I was teaching and when I was doing crisis intervention is my son, who has autism, is on the lower end of the level of functioning. So he has an IQ of about 53. And so sometimes it makes it very challenging with some of his behaviors and whatnot. His processing speed is not what we would think of as having, our neurotypical child. For example, I asked him one evening, for dinner, would you like pizza A or pizza B? It took him 25 minutes to process that information and to be able to tell me what it was that he wanted. This also carries over into school. Sometimes teachers don't understand that, they ask a child a question and they might be 5 questions down the road, and our child is just getting to the answer to question number 1. So we have to remember those things when we're working with a lot of our kids and parenting a lot of our kids. Teresa, if you would go to the next slide, please. One of the things, whether we're parenting neurotypical children or we're parenting our children with autism, consistency is very important. We know that a lot of our kids, things are very black and white. And so, that consistency piece is also very important. We can't change how we respond to things, just willy-nilly. Also, the amount of verbiage we use when we're talking with our kids, being concise and clear in our directions, not overloading them with a lot of language. Because again, that processing speed interferes with their ability to make quick decisions. One of the things that's important is being proactive and not reactive with our kids. If we know that we have a family function that's going to happen on the weekend, giving them time to prepare for that family function, reminding them, explaining to them what's going to happen, where it's going to be, maybe who's going to be there, to help them feel more comfortable in that setting, which is not their normal, typical home setting. When we're teaching our kids, whether it's how to clean their room, how to, get dressed, how to tie their shoes, how to, anything that we're asking of them, breaking it down into small incremental steps, shaping that behavior, starting at something very basic and working our way into what it is we actually want them to see. For example, if we want them to sit in a chair at the dinner table and use their silverware to eat with, the first thing we want to be able to do is get them to sit in the chair. So if they're sitting on the floor next to the chair, we want to reward that behavior because we're starting to shape that behavior to get them to sit in that chair. After they've sat on the floor, then we can start introducing them into sitting in the chair, then rewarding that behavior as they respond to that. And from there, introducing, whether it's a spoon, whether it's a cup, a fork, but taking that time and breaking that down into what we call a task analysis so that they can learn those incremental steps before we ask them, go sit down at the table and eat your dinner. Because for them, that may be too overwhelming. Providing reinforcement when they engage in appropriate behavior is also important. It doesn't have to be a huge reward, but when I've worked with kids in the classrooms, if they complete a task that I've asked them to do, providing them with, whether it's a Skittle or whether it's a goldfish cracker or something, to reinforce that behavior so that they know this is what is expected of them. One of the things that is important for parents is to involve yourselves in your children's activities and interests. We know that many of our kids on the spectrum, they have very restricted or very limited interests. And those interests sometimes can be extremely overwhelming for us when, all our child wants to do is talk about planets and space, or they only want to talk about, train schedules that take place across the United States, or they only want to talk about, a particular type of animal. So find different activities that you can incorporate those interests in and be involved with them and spend time with them that way on their level. Setting boundaries is important, whether it's our neurotypical kids or if it's our kids on the spectrum. Boundaries are important because it gives children a sense of security and they know what they're able to and not to do. So setting those boundaries are important, and more important for us as parents is not to feel guilty that we put those boundaries in place. When we tell our child, you can only go so far in the front yard, we do it because we don't want them going into the street and getting, in traffic. So putting those boundaries in place, whether it's, only so many minutes on their tablet or so much time to, play with their friends or whatever. It's important that they understand those boundaries, and it's there for their protection. Another thing that's important is celebrating our children's successes, regardless of how small they may be. Just because our child has a diagnosis of autism, developmental delay, whatever it is, that doesn't define who our child is. They are the same little human that they were before they got that diagnosis. And so celebrating their successes, no matter how small, within their scope of capability is important, because it helps to build their self-esteem, and it helps them to have some positive self-regard. And if there's one thing we know, that, a lot of our kids, that's a struggle, especially in today's day and age. So being able to celebrate those little accomplishments with them is a big thing. Along with that is embracing their unique gifts. Each one of our children may do things differently, but they all have a unique gift that they have to offer us, whether it's their kind heart, whether it's their, level of intelligence when it does come to, knowing things about the solar system or train schedules or whatever it might be. They all have unique gifts that they bring to the table, and we need to embrace those gifts, and we need to celebrate them. Another thing is place the emphasis on what can my child do, as opposed to what is it that my child is unable to do. Again, it goes back to, helping them to be successful, focusing on those little accomplishments, and not looking at, they're 10 years old and they can't tie their shoes. Well, we can work around that by getting shoes with Velcro. Build on their strengths. If they like things like planets, incorporate that into their academics and into their reading. If they're, a struggling reader, find things on their level about whatever their interest is and help to incorporate that into their academics. If they like trains, if they like automobiles, whatever, use those things and help them, okay, Johnny has 3 cars and he gets 2 more for his birthday. How many is going to have, how many does he have altogether? It helps incorporate that interest, and it helps to bring things down to their level so that they can understand things. And it helps them to know that you value what it is that they think about and what it is that they, are interested in. Teresa, next slide, please. One of the things that's really important, and I found extremely helpful with my son, was creating social stories. I really miss the days of the Polaroid Instamatic cameras, because I would use those and take pictures of him and then put them in a book and write a social story. One of the social stories I wrote for him was wearing his seatbelt in the car. And so it helps using those social stories, because it not only tells them what the expectation is, but it helps to reinforce what that expectation is. Visual aids when it comes to whether it's a daily schedule, whether it's helping them around the house to put their toys away, having a picture, on a bin with their dinosaurs where they go, or on their dresser drawer where their socks and underwear go, or where their t-shirts might go, or their jammies. So having those visual cues for them is very, very helpful for so many of our kids on the spectrum. Modeling the appropriate behavior. That's one of the biggest ways we as individuals often learn things. We see someone model the behavior, we copy that behavior. Our kids are like little sponges. They pick up a whole lot more than what we think they do. And so modeling appropriate behavior for them is very important. Showing them how to use a cup properly, or how to use a utensil to eat, how to, when they get older, maybe fold, their t-shirts so that they can put them away in their drawer. So modeling is a very important tool that we can use to help our children. Being clear and concise, excuse me, in our expectations. Again, that goes along with that minimal amount of verbiage. clear, concise. They know exactly what the expectation is. They're more able to process that information, and then hopefully over time they can get to where it is we want them to be. Have a contingency plan in place. This is really important, as we as parents know we are not going to be here for our children forever. So what are some things that we need to be aware of as parents when we are thinking about the future and our children who are on the spectrum? Depending on their level of functioning, do we need to look at guardianship for them? Do we need to look at, being their payee for Social Security benefits? Do we look at, okay, when I pass, who's going to take over the responsibilities of my child to make sure they have the things that they need? Is my child going to live with me for, my entire life? When that time comes and I pass, then who are they going to live with? So those are really important things that, unfortunately, a lot of other parents don't really have to think about. But it's something that is as difficult and as challenging as it can be. We as parents who have children, on the spectrum or with any kind of a developmental disability, need to be prepared for the future. I think it's also really important to remember that our children need everything that a neurotypical child needs. They just need to get it in a different way. Sometimes physical touch is very painful for our children. So if they need that comfort, if they need that security, how is it we can go about giving it to them? Whether it's, do we need to wrap them and swaddle them in a blanket? Do we need to make sure that they have maybe a weighted vest that helps to provide some of that sensory input that can help calm them down when they're having a difficult time? Do we need to have noise canceling headphones for them? What is it that our children need, that our neurotypical kids need, but we just need to know how to provide that for them at their level? Next slide, please, Teresa.
Mm.
My child likes my spouse better than me. What can I do? This is not an untypical experience. One of the things I always recommend to parents is to involve yourself in your child's interests and activities. Set aside some one-on-one time just with your child on the spectrum. Don't take it personal. All our
That's
kids,
easier
they're
said than done.
I'm sorry? Whether, it's our neurotypical kids or it's our kids on the spectrum, each child has a parent that they prefer and that they turn to, whether it's in a time of crisis, whether it's, they want to share something with them. They have that one parent that they just have that connection with, more so than maybe their other parent. Involve yourself in your child's daily routine. Maybe it's bath time. You can spend that time with your child, giving him or her a bath and spending that time so you can help build that bond. Teresa, next slide, please. So what are some of our unique challenges as far as with our kiddos on the spectrum? Again, we have to remember that just because they have a diagnosis, it doesn't define who our child is. They are that same loving, caring, giving, unique human being that they were before they got that diagnosis. What I used to tell some of my parents when I was a school psychologist and I would have to give them a diagnosis that their child had autism, it doesn't define who they are. It's just a tool that helps us to get them whatever it is that they need to be the most successful individual they can be at their level of ability. Another thing that's important is take time for self-care. As parents, we get so overwhelmed with all the demands and responsibilities that go along with raising a child on the spectrum that we kind of tend to put ourselves on the back burner. So it's important that we take time for self-care, because if we don't take care of ourselves, how are we going to take care of our kids? Don't be afraid to ask for help. This, for me, at times was really difficult. I was a single parent raising my child. His dad died 4 days before his first birthday. So I did a lot of it on my own. And sometimes it is hard to ask for help because you don't think that other people can provide the care and whatnot that you can for your child at a level that they need. But I've learned over time that it really is important to ask for help when we need it. Communication with your spouse is extremely important. If you're struggling, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to talk to one another. You need to let each other know, where you're at in this journey, because it is a journey. You also need to take time to connect as a couple. Try to find time to take a date night, whether it's once a month, once every other week. If you have family that is around that you can turn to for support, if there are resources in the community that provide respite care, take advantage of those opportunities and connect not only as a couple, but as a family. Spending time with, your neurotypical children, making sure that they feel valued and whatnot is just as important. This can lead to, unfortunately, some long-term ramifications when our neurotypical children feel that they've kind of been left to the wayside and they weren't made to feel as important. So if, one child has an event at school, maybe kind of piggyback on one another, and mom goes to this particular event, then the next time dad goes to this particular event, so that the child doesn't have to miss out and feel that they're not as important. Another thing that's really important is don't let outside influences negatively impact your family. I had this with my own family. My son's father's family could not accept the fact that he had a diagnosis of autism. They felt that he was just a strong-willed, undisciplined child, and it made things very contentious. And as a result, we've had little to no contact with them because they could not accept my son for who he was. Children with autism often require more of your time. But again, try to find time for your other children to ensure that they do not feel that they have been left out. Teresa, next slide, please. Work together to alleviate some of the stress. One thing that's important is keep all pertinent information regarding your child's needs in a folder, a binder, an electronic folder on the computer that's easily accessible for either parent or care provider, especially in case of an emergency. What medications is a child taking? What regular appointments might the child have, whether it's counseling or ABA therapy? What time is school pickup? What time is daycare pickup or drop off? All those different things are important so that each parent has access and the other care providers that are involved have access. Also, share parenting and household responsibilities. One parent can't do it all on their own. There are circumstances where, yes, in a single family household, unfortunately, one parent has to do it all. But in a family where mom and dad are both there, it's important to share those parenting and household responsibilities. That way, you kind of cut down on some of the stress, some of the burnout that goes along with being a parent in general. Teresa, next slide, please. With regards to parent burnout, again, don't be afraid to ask for help. Look at what resources are available in the community. I haven't been here in Ohio very long, so I can't really speak to what we have available here. I can tell you when I was in Alaska, some of the services were phenomenal, where my son finally was able to receive some respite services. He was able to receive some services as far as through the school district, an in-home trainer that would come to the house and work with him. And so that those are, some great things to look at. What resources are available in the community? Right now, he resides in a group home in Alaska. And so that's another resource to look at, long term. Is your child going to reside with you? Or are you going to eventually look at, a residential care facility where they can live and work and be a part of the community that way? Taking time for yourself is extremely important. Self-care is a vital part of being a parent, regardless of our child and their needs. Getting rest when we have a new infant that we bring home from the hospital, as moms, we try to do all those things that need to be done when our child is taking a nap, but what we really should be doing is resting and recuperating just like they are. So making sure we take care of ourselves. And then again, if someone offers help, accept it, even if it's in a small increment. If someone can watch your little human for 30 minutes while you run to the grocery store, or you go and fill up and put gas in the car so you don't have to take them along with you and they're fussing or fidgeting in their seat belt or in their car seat. So these are just some things that I hope will help you on your journey as you move forward in raising and enjoying your child on the spectrum. Teresa, I think that was our last slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for doing this presentation for us.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I am happy to start with some questions that I received um, in advance of the presentation. Some folks submitted some questions beforehand. If you have some questions, also feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be checking that and I can read those out loud as well. So one of the questions I have here for Dr. Van Brecklen, is there a good way to get my son to start interacting with his six-month-old sister, or should I just let him go at his own pace?
Preferably